Welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Envision Speaker Series. I'm here with Michelle, George, and Larry, and we actually encompass almost the whole globe because we're all over the place. Today, we are going to talk about retirement, and not just retirement, but how to retire successfully, because these are professionals that are going to look at retirement from different perspectives and give us a holistic approach to not just retire, but to move into retirement healthy, wealthy, and wise, I hope. Let's start with our panel members. I want to go from Michelle to George to Larry. Please introduce yourselves and tell me why you're in this conversation today.
Well, I'm so thrilled to be here. So thank you for the invitation. I'm Dr. Michelle Fritsch, and I'm coming at this from the standpoint of a clinician. I saw over years of practice people who seemed to have their life together. They seemed fine. They retired, and then they rapidly declined. Either they actually passed away or their health declined to the point that they couldn't do those things that they'd planned. And most importantly, as I got to know them, almost always it was preventable. And I didn't see enough effort to try to prevent those sorts of things that derail fabulous retirement plans. So that's why I'm here.
Michelle, thank you. George, what brings you to the table?
Hi, thanks, Keith. Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm a retirement coach, retirement mentor, and I help retirees find a new beginning. I do that because I retired thinking that it was going to be a glorious sunset, and it was not a great place to be. I found myself sapped of energy, and I didn't know who I was. So I sort of spent a great deal of time looking into this topic, and I think it was after a sort of a 30-day silent retreat, I went into an adventure within, an inventory, if you like, to discover who I was, who I wanted to be, and how I was going to lead the rest of my life. And that's really effectively how I came to help retirees find a new beginning with my program, which is Dare to Discover Your Purpose, which is also a book. And the reason I'm here is because I recognize that health is hugely important. Finances are hugely important, but none of these are going to serve us if we don't have a new identity and a new purpose in this second chapter, or the second mountain of our lives, where we have to live our lives very differently to what we did before. So if the first part of our lives we were caterpillars, we're now butterflies. So we need to learn how to fly.
George, I appreciate that. I want to learn how to fly. But before we do, Larry, I need money to do that.
Yes, you do. Mikey, thank you so much for having me. I'm Larry Heller, certified financial planner and the president of Heller Wealth Management, a fee-only financial planning and investment advisory firm, and also author of a book called Retire Right. So we help people put a game plan so they can reach retirement, but even more important, when they do, we help them live what I call their life unlimited, and making sure they don't have to worry about the everyday changes in the financial market, so they can enjoy their retirement by putting together a proper game plan. So that's what we do, and we help everything on the financial end.
I like game plans, Larry. So give me a game plan, please.
Yeah. So
how much money do I need to retire?
Yeah. So that's the biggest question. What is that number that you need? And a couple things. I mean, a lot of times a retirement, people don't even have a retirement plan. And there are studies showing that if you have a plan, you're more prepared for it. But believe it or not, Keith, people actually think they need more money than they do at retirement. And a lot of them don't spend enough in retirement because they're not sure. They don't know. So how do you go about putting a proper plan together? And we kind of talk about a reservoir strategy, and really figuring out, the first thing you really should do is really figure out what your income and expenses are. And a lot of people don't really know that. So when they go to retire, they're nervous because that spigot is turned off. There's no more income coming in. There's only money going out, and they get nervous every time. So if you put a plan together and recreate that, knowing what your income and your expenses are, and put an analysis together to show that based upon a reasonable rate of return that it's going to work, they start to enjoy life. They feel a little bit more relaxed. They don't worry about things. When I tell people, don't turn the TV on and worry about what's going on, because we'll create a plan to avoid that. And how do we do that? Well, one of the things is having enough money sitting in cash for your expenses. And we usually tell people somewhere between 2 and 3 years. And the reason because that, depending upon their asset allocation, the equity market will recover within that time frame, so they can ride out any downturn. So we create that's their first reservoir, and then another reservoir is really more fixed income, a little bit more risk, a little bit higher rates of return, and their third reservoir is the equity strategy, which is still 10 years away. So when you're retiring in your, let's say, mid-60s, we call it your second act, you may have another 30 years to live. So you do want to have some exposure to some higher rates of return, but that's your longer term reservoir. So when you start breaking it down and putting this together and putting a strategy together, it lifts up people's awareness. And when you run the numbers, people a lot of times saying, well, yeah, I have enough money so I can retire. And I didn't know that I can actually spend even a little bit more money. So putting that plan together and having that finances gives you the peace of mind to enjoy your second act.
So I got one question though. Well, actually I got lost a question because that's my brand. But my main question for you right now is, you mentioned the word scared. People are scared when they come to see you. We have an emotional investment in our money, in our attachment with money. How do you help people get over that scared feeling, that fear that you mentioned earlier? Now, yes, you create a plan, but how do you help people feel comfortable, I guess, with their money?
Well, there are a couple of different strategies that we do, and you can do that. And you have two things. Some people are, they're scared, but then they also say, well, I want to die broke. I want to spend enough money. They only have $1 left. And so how do you balance the two? So one of the tricks that we do is we create whatever their monthly expenses are from their investments that goes into their bank account each month. So it's just like they're earning a paycheck. So it goes in, they don't feel like they're taking money from their investments. They feel like that's just their regular kind of pay. And then if they do have a big event and they need to take some more, they can do that. But it gets them a little bit of a feeling to do that. And I don't care how much money you have the first year, there's still going to be an adjustment period and getting used to that. But once they've gone through some of these ups and these downs and they've learned to oh, this is working, they feel a lot more at ease.
George, when Larry's talking about getting into it, understanding, creating a plan, I go back to what you said earlier. Without really having an identity and a purpose, creating a plan may seem like a waste of effort. So from your perspective, how do you create this idea that I want to achieve something, maybe something entirely new, and I could think about my monies in a way that's going to support that new purpose in life? Can you talk to me about that?
Sure. That's a really, really good question. First of all, I want to pay tribute to Larry's mindset of how he's helping his clients. And this reservoir thing is exactly how I would suggest that somebody does this, because the beauty is it's staged for 3 different, because you still have to have equities. But to come back to answer your question, you do have to have a new identity and a new purpose in this stage of life, because who we were has gone. We're never going to go back to who we were. And our natural instinct is people who retire for those who want to go back in, They want to go back in the same place that they used to be, or that kind of work. They don't realize this ship has sailed, right? You're on the high seas now, and you're at the mercy of the elements. Now, the beauty of that is that although it makes us feel a little insecure, I'm touching on the fear bit here because we're in the unknown. It's also exciting because it's an adventure if you just change the way you look at it. So if we've got another 25, 30 years to go, and granted any one of us can die before the day's out, but the vast majority of us are going to make it to our 90s and beyond. We cannot go into this stage of life with an old mindset and think that we can just continue on a linear level, right? The caterpillar doesn't know how the butterfly exists. But if you think of a ship in harbor, a ship is never meant to stay in harbor. And in retirement, we're telling people, stay in harbor. We're meant to be plowing the high seas. We're built for excitement, for new adventures, even in old age, right? Now, of course, the children of those whose investments are in this situation will be freaking out, thinking, oh my God, there goes my inheritance. But the reality is you can cater for both with a good financial advisor such as Larry. And so what I'm saying is that you need to find a new identity. Who do I want to be in this next stage of life? That's number one. Number two, what do I want to be doing? What do I love to do? What do I lose all sense of time in? And I would even add, as part of the exercise that you're going to ask your audience to do is, what are you afraid of? Check
That
behind
hurt
that.
me. What am I afraid of? Goodness.
What are you, yeah, because our ego doesn't want to go there.
Yeah.
But the reality is what we're afraid of is actually what we love.
Can you elaborate? That didn't make any sense to me.
Yes, let me explain. I'm sorry. I think it was Joseph Campbell, the American mythologist, who said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
The hero of 1,000 faces.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Exactly. So what I'm saying is that that's why you kind of almost need courage at this stage of life. Remember, Larry said the spigot is shut now. Fear sets in. Our sandbox starts to get smaller. We've got another 30 years to go. The spigot has not shut yet. The old spigot is shut, but you can now learn to create a new spigot, to do something new. It may not pay you what you used to get, but you're still going to earn a living because you love what you're doing. So now your financial situation is going to take a whole different turn. And this is where Larry's concept of reservoir starts to work beautifully with this, because he's still in equities. You're still going to be in equities for the long term, but you've still got bonds and you've still got cash to look for. But the cash may be less now because you're working and earning something, because you love to do what you do and you're engaging with people. So in terms of health, having a new identity and a new purpose is also going to help you with your mental and emotional health, to speak to Michelle's issue, because you can have you can do all the exercise in the world, do all the healthy stuff, but if your mental and emotional health are compromised, you're not going to last very long.
Michelle, is that true?
So incredibly spot on true. Yes.
Can you elaborate? Talk to me about what it needs to be healthy. Because if I've got a mindset that says I want to go accomplish something, but I've got a heart, and I'm just going to add this, my doctor, people tell me don't. I had a heart attack last year in 2022. So I don't know if I'm making it 30 years. Y'all, I got money to do that, but I need to be healthy or I'm not going to see that 30-year span. Michelle, help me, please. How can I be healthy?
Well, just like you plan a financial portfolio with Larry, which I do love your reservoirs and the way that you approach that, I propose you need a wellness portfolio to go with it, because you can't just assume that having one will give you the other. And those 7 places that I've seen people have the most difficulty, one is coming from the health background. I thought this would be it. It's just your health information. Most health mistakes across the globe are made because the person making the decision doesn't have all the information they need. And right now in the US anyway, health information is just not as streamlined and coordinated as it needs to be. And so the first thing you can do is to have your health information updated, accurate, and ready to hand to your doctor or whoever's making decisions to make those accurate. Know what your risk factors are, because much of the US healthcare system doesn't kick in until something has happened, but we can prevent the something if we know our risk factors and we can take care of those. And then I thought, okay, that's going to do it. That's going to keep people healthy. But no, what George is talking about is probably more critical than any of that, which is knowing who are you in that next phase. What is your purpose? I believe it's inside of you. It's not like you can go to a store and pick it off of a shelf and purchase it. It's inside of you, but that journey that George takes you on to figure out what that is so that you can live fulfilled brings the health with it. It also gives you that social network, which is so important. You know, when you're living in your purpose, usually you're around other people who like the same thing. You're mentally sharp because you love what you're doing and it keeps you going. And then you're even better equipped to help other people know how to take care of you because you have a better sense of who you are and what you like and what you don't like and what you want. And you're better at helping care for others because as our population is sort of aging in the way that it is around the world for the most part, most of us will care for one another at some point. So we just line up all of those pieces as your wellness portfolio to help you keep from falling in those pitfalls of coming into retirement with bad health because you haven't thought about it in a long time and you don't know where to go from there. Or you lose your sense of who you are and why you're important in the world, and you start watching television for a living, which is not healthy at all. Or you become somebody that you don't like and nobody else likes, and you lose your relationships, and that leads to a downward spiral. And George is shaking his head. I'm sure you've seen it as well. So that health and that purpose and having the money to pay for it coming together, all 3 pieces are essential.
I want to
jump in there for a second because it is so critical, and we have a lot of clients that have crossed over into retirement. So, and after speaking with George and purpose, so now I'm asking those questions at retirement. I actually spoke to a client this morning who was really thankful. We have a plan financially, everything's taken care of. But now I'm saying, okay, so what's your purpose? What's going on? He retired and he was a sports writer. And now he's playing soccer every day. He's working out. He's hiking. He's going to museums. And I'm like, well, what's your purpose? He goes, Larry, right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm just tired and I want to enjoy that. But I know in a year or two, I'm going to write that book that I want to write. So he already has something, his purpose in mind. So he's got that. And the other thing, and you mentioned that before, Michelle, is the relationship. So he said to me, the one thing that I miss working is all my friends and meeting my friends. So he's making a point to having dinners with some of them. So he's got purpose. He's got the relationships in there. He's got the financial in there. So when you put all those together, I said to him, you kind of got it figured out. Not everyone has figured all 3 of those parts out. And it's some of our clients who have worked much later in life. Whether there's a correlation or not, Michelle, you can kind of tell us better, but I find that mentally they're better and they're healthier. So it's not just physical health, it's your mental health. And how do you keep that going after you stop working? So having all 3 of these put together will lead to a successful second act.
Can you speak to that, Michelle, before I ask my next question?
No, Larry hit the nail on the head. Health is so much more than our physical health. There's our mental health, depression, anxiety, those things. There's our emotional health. How are we handling the news, the things that are happening in our life? Are we blowing around up and down like waves on the ocean, or like a weather vane that's just blowing back and forth? Or do we have that sense of purpose? Do we know who we are? Do we have our values and our sense of identity solid so that those things don't blow us around so much and we navigate better and our health is better? The social piece and the spiritual piece. We're all spiritual beings, however we express that. All those come together as the definition of health.
I love that. I want to go back to something that George said earlier. I don't know if this is in his book or not, and I'm gonna, forgive me, George, if I don't say it exactly as you did. The caterpillar does not know how the butterfly, I think I'm tripping over my words, how the butterfly exists. I wrote it down.
All right.
So I don't know if it's in your book, but I want you to expand on that. Then I want your colleagues to jump in this conversation, because you're talking about, and we've already, kind of tapped into it. We're talking about pivotal transition here. We're talking about real change, scary change, change that requires intention and intentionality. How do we make that change happen?
Right. First of all, change is something I think that most of us humans hate. We hate change.
Yeah.
Our egos don't like change. We've spent a whole lifetime getting all those certificates up on the wall, all the accolades and the ambition and everything else. And our ego is now basking in that glory of our wonderful career.
Yeah.
And now that career has come to an end. Not only are we losing all the friends that we had, for those of us who did have friends in business, and we're not sociopaths, and we haven't lost them all. But for those of us who have friends and who at work and who we've lost, we're also losing who we are, because our work is so much part of who we are that we lose our work, we lose our friends. Who are we now? And we are very harsh on ourselves, because when we don't have work and identity, what do? We crush ourselves even more. I'm a nobody. I'm a nothing. All those negative feelings start to eat you up. So here's my point. To answer your question, the caterpillar to butterfly, there's something in between called the chrysalis, the crisis. What you're in this thing, it's a cocoon, right? And the caterpillar that goes into that cocoon, into that chrysalis, is not having a happy time. He's not having a nap in there. He's being broken down. He or she is being broken down into pieces, right? And so that caterpillar is having what you and I would call an ego death. The caterpillar is dying to be reformatted into something new. And what I'm suggesting to my clients and prospects is, who you are is gone. Stop trying to resurrect that. It's gone. Who you're going to be is not yet defined. So you're in this liminal space, in this space that you've spent your whole life avoiding. This place of change, this place of uncertainty, this place of ego death. Nobody wants to be there. I certainly don't. But guess what? I am in there. We're all in there. And we're going through this transition, which is actually painful, until we slowly get comfortable with it. We relax with it. We go with the flow. And then suddenly we start enjoying things we didn't think that we would enjoy. And then suddenly there's new opportunities that turn up. And your life has taken a complete left turn from where you thought it would ever go. That's the transformation, by allowing the magic to play itself out. In other words, we're not in control as we've been in our working life. We've allowed the magic, the mystery of life unfolding for us, right? Now, this is not a place for the weak of heart. And it's so easy to go tripping back to what I used to be. Thank you. This is not for me. But actually, you need to have the courage to go forward. And imagine what your health is going to be like when you've grabbed life by the collar and you're up riding high and you're suddenly sitting next to your financial advisor and you're going, more in equities and private equity, please, and possibly 1 or 2% in hedge funds, because suddenly now you have courage. You're now the butterfly, you're flying. Now, I'm exaggerating to make a point, because what I'm trying to say is if you're feeling high, right, because you love what you do, suddenly now the old friends you had are gone. You can't get those back. Some of them you can, lifelong friends, perhaps a few, a handful, but most of them will go. You've got to be in a place to make new friends in a new environment that you enjoy being in. And your health is going to change and your finances are going to change immensely.
Larry, Michelle, can you talk about that pivot? And how
Yeah, I mean, I'll give
help?
you an example. And have a client, a couple, and the husband wanted to retire a couple years before your normal retirement age. He was a corporate executive and he was out, and he started to think about what he wanted to do next. What was his next purpose? And for him, it was being a nature photographer. That was always kind of a hobby, and he wanted to take that to the next level and not really make it a living. So the first thing we did was we put a game plan together and make sure financially they able to do that. His wife was a school teacher, and now fast forward a couple years, they both retire. He now, the finances is fine. They're working on their game plan. They don't have an issue with that, but he now is loving. He has a small gallery. He's traveling. He's taking pictures. He's producing them. On the flip side, the wife is missing. She doesn't have a purpose. She was a school teacher for 30 years, and that's gone. And she hasn't figured out where to replace that. Luckily, she just spoke to her recently, and she's kind of have a few things now trying to replace that. So just a husband and wife, and seeing how one had a purpose and the other one didn't, and how their struggles in retirement are real. So having that purpose, like George says, it is just as important as the financial side, because without that, you could, find yourself really in a bad spot.
Michelle?
And both of you touched on the importance of the communication when it comes to relationships. And I find often people talk early in their marriage, and everything's rosy and glowing and wonderful about what their plans are going to be and how they're going to live out this life, and even what retirement is going to be. And then life happens, then they're in their chrysalis for all of that time. And when the day comes that retirement can arrive, sometimes it doesn't happen at the same time. So one falls into a routine before the other one is ready. Or other times they realize that they've come up with different conclusions without even realizing it. And so we really encourage having that conversation before the day of retirement, ideally at least a couple years before that day of retirement, and see if you're on the same page and what you want. And if you've both identified that purpose, and it does not have to be together. I think it's probably a bad thing if you're together 24/7. So individually, what are your purposes? And then what can you do together that brings you joy in that next phase? So communication is key in bringing all those pieces together.
Michelle, do I need to ask why 24/7 communication is not good? Maybe I should hold off on that question.
I've had patients back in the healthcare day, and now people that I work with nearing retirement who've demonstrated this in a lot of different ways. You're making me think of one particular couple that seemed to get along beautifully. They were both retired. They were happy when they were around everybody. Like, what is your secret? And they said their secret is they only have to get along 6 hours a day. One of them stays up till like 3 a.m. and sleeps till noon. And the other one goes to bed at 6 o'clock at night and gets up early in the morning. And so they only have that short window that they have to get along.
Maybe they should write a book on it. Go ahead, George.
No, I'm just going to pick up on what Larry and Michelle have said on the relationship thing. I think it's really, really crucial. And Larry's example is far more common than one would think. Two people go through life for 40 years in a marriage. And because everything else is fixed, as it were, things can carry on, even if it's bumpy and, you know, the communication is there, but it's not ideal. And then comes retirement, and one person, sometimes it's the female, sometimes it's the male, finds their new purpose. Now, when that individual finds a new purpose, and more often than not, the other doesn't, certainly not at the same time, there's a divergence. And even communication doesn't work here, because for all the money in the world, they're on two different planets. And what we see a lot nowadays is silver divorces, because people have grown apart. The circumstances have forced them to diverge. So it's not about just communication. It's that the things that were originally fixed have now become variables. So things have moved around, the map has moved around, and people's direction moves around. And interestingly enough, I'm told that it's the females that initiate the silver divorces more often than not, which I found interesting. But which tells
interesting
me,
you call it silver divorces. We call it gray divorces here, and you're definitely right about that, having more. I'm a certified divorce financial analyst, so we are seeing that later in life, before retirement, and even some in retirement. So that is interesting. But I think I like silver better than gray, George. I'm going to change.
yeah,
that.
gray sounds pretty drastic. But again, to this point about silver or gray divorces, I think one of the problems is that it's not a panacea. Right? There's advantages and disadvantages. And here's the thing. Going alone may make you go faster, but going together, you'll get further. That said, and I think I've just lost my thread, but what I'm saying is that I think what happens when you divorce is that you're also more likely to become lonelier. And that's another epidemic that we face in old age, loneliness. And that can apply to, even if you're married, you can still be lonely, particularly if you've only got a 6-hour window. As Michelle said, you know, you can be with other people and still be lonely. Lonely, you know, I think being alone is a wonderful thing, because solitude is good. It replenishes you. You can be out in nature and do your own thing. But being alone is not a choice. Being alone is, you're alone. And it's a state of mind. But
I want to end this call on a good note. So I want to go back to each of you. Give those who are watching, listening to this conversation, from your perspective and your expertise, a something to do today after they hang up this call and they've listened to the conversation that will prepare them for that. And I can't even say the word, the chrysalis, when the caterpillar becomes the butterfly, that transition element. How can they prepare for it? Please. Larry, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I'm going to really say, it's plan, and really trying to figure out, okay, when is that time frame? Having a destination in there as early on as you can, even if it doesn't be the exact time frame. What are your expenses going to be? What are they now? What are they going to be in the future? A lot of people don't realize that when they retire, they spend more money because now they have more time to travel, go out. So planning for that, planning for the income, planning for how much they need to save, And putting a game plan together and working towards that will make their transition much easier. Even figuring out where do they want to live, and I call it, paint me a vision of your life, your second act. And sometimes they start talking about numbers, and I'm like, no, not numbers. Envision what it is. And they say, well, I want to move here and I want to live here. And, oh, well, if you're going to do that, are you going to sell your house? You're going to do this. So really having a plan, both what you want to do in your next act, and then going down to the nuts and bolts and start figuring out what are those numbers going to be, so you can get that. And if you need help, there's plenty of good financial advisors that can help you with that as well.
George?
I would say, ask yourself this question. What do you want to do with your one wild and precious life? What do you want to do with your one wild and precious life? That's a line from Mary Oliver, the poet. And the reason is, we think we're immortal. Well, we don't think, we feel it. We don't think about death. We don't want to think about death, but death is our friend. And if you recognize that the time you have for the rest of this stay that you have on this planet is a limited amount of time, use it wisely. Think about, you don't want to be on your deathbed thinking, oh, I didn't do what I should have done. It's too late then. So think of retirement as life knocking on your door and saying, what do you want to do with this one wild and precious life of yours?
Good question. Michelle, do you have an answer?
What I want to do with my life, or thank you. I'm going to go practical for a second from the healthcare side and say one of the best things you can do before retirement is work with your healthcare team to have all of your accurate health data in a place you can access it, and have a list, and you can do it on your smart device these days, where you can have all of the medications, the over-the-counter once-in-a-while medicines you take, the vitamins, the supplements, the cannabis, the tobacco, the alcohol, everything that you use, so that when you are a butterfly and traveling the world and you are doing something wild and twist your ankle and you need to go to an emergency department, you've got all of your information where good decisions could be made about your care.
I love that. That's a lot of wisdom right there. I do appreciate that. George, Larry, Michelle, thank you for being on this call. I appreciate your time. And for those of you who are watching and listening, this has been another edition of the Envision Speaker Series. And I'll see you next time. Take care.